finding engineers who think about business problems and think about product issues is one of the most efficient things you can do. I think the biggest source of waste in a software enterprise is often engineers building the wrong thing. And engineers build the wrong thing because they don't understand the requirements. And they don't understand the requirements because they're not communicating. They're either not communicating back to stakeholders what they think the requirements are, or they're not ingesting the requirements correctly from stakeholders. There's all these side advantages from working with good communicators and working with product and business focused engineers too, right? They can function with slightly less PM support. They can self-investigate certain kinds of problems on their own. And that was mind-blowing to me that you could really have these like hyper-efficient teams if you had people who were versatile enough that they could do this kind of work. I think the fact that we have engineers who think about product issues has really been a superpower of ours.
This is Future Formed, where we explore how nonprofits are driving efficiency and innovation to make a greater impact. I'm your host, Erik Fisher, and this show is presented by Jotform Enterprise, the leading web form building platform for nonprofit organizations worldwide. With response data securely stored online, you can create beautiful, customized forms that meet your needs. Stick around until the end of the episode to find out how your nonprofit can access an exclusive discount with Jotform Enterprise. All right, let's dive in. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Geoff Harcourt, the Chief Technology Officer at CommonLit, a nonprofit dedicated to improving literacy and writing skills for students worldwide. CommonLit's platform serves over 30 million users, offering free instructional materials, comprehensive curriculum, and essential teacher support, powered by practical, tech-driven tools. With a career spanning engineering, software development, and leadership roles at organizations like Thoughtbot, Geoff brings deep expertise in scaling tech solutions to meet growing demands. As CTO, he's been instrumental in driving CommonLit's reliability, accessibility, and data-driven innovations. Geoff, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you.
I'm really excited to be here, Erik.
So I know I just listed off a big old bio, but I think what we really want to know is what's your journey been like? Fill us in on your background in engineering and technology and how that led you to your current role as CTO, Chief Technology Officer at CommonLit.
You know, I had a very circuitous route to becoming a software engineer. And when I talk to students at engineering boot camps and things like that, I often advise them not to take my career path as a template for where to go. I was a history major in college, but I always had an interest in software. So I managed the student help desk when I was in school. And then after college, I worked at a consulting firm that did business process improvement for state and local governments. So I was like a product person, a functional analyst, and I worked on essentially like rules and requirements for payroll systems. So things like the city of New York, the state of California, which actually has 300,000 employees because everyone who works for the university system is an employee of the state. So the payroll is actually quite large. And then I did that for a few years. I moved on to do some other producty roles at a political tech place that did some work for progressive nonprofits and Democratic campaigns. I had a very, very brief stint working in healthcare. And then I decided that I was tired of asking software engineers to do things and feeling like I was not being told the truth about what was hard and what was easy. So I taught myself how to code. I also don't advise people to do this. I think I missed the boot camp revolution by a couple of years, and I think it would have been easier to go to a boot camp than to do what I did. And then I had some very nice luck where a couple people that I'd worked with in prior jobs were in desperate need of software engineering help, just as I decided to quit my job and sort of upend my life and go on this new path of being a software engineer. So for a while, I was a freelancer. I did some work for, places that didn't have a technical co-founder. I then went into business with one of my clients. We built a startup called Cortex, which helps manage the environmental systems to increase efficiency in commercial real estate. That system is still in existence today. It helps optimize the air conditioning spend in places like the Empire State Building. After a while at Cortex, I went and worked at Thoughtbot. Thoughtbot's an amazing place. It's a product design studio. I had some both exposure to some really great coworkers and also some really amazing customers. I really, my favorite projects at Thoughtbot, sometimes we did things like get a startup their first product off the ground. But the work that I actually enjoyed the most was finding a client who had something that was taking off and the growth actually threatened to sort of choke the enterprise. They weren't ready for it. That was, to me, was actually the most fun work that I did as a consultant. That was actually one of the things that drew me to CommonLit. When I started talking to Michelle Brown, who is our CEO, I had been advising her informally for about a year, but they had just closed a big grant from Google.org, and they were making some big moves, and the user growth was just, on this sort of hockey stick shaped curve. It really seemed like an opportunity to make a big impact by helping them scale for all this demand that they had created through sort of pure love of the curriculum. I've actually been at CommonLit now for 7 years. My 7th anniversary is in 1 week. So,
congrats!
And thank you. It's I didn't expect to be at a single place for this long. I used to, every few years I would jump to the next thing, and so it's been really cool to work on something and invest in it and see the impact of staying there for a while.
Oh, it's great to hear about all of that growth. And obviously, CommonLit is serving millions of students and teachers around the world. From your perspective as CTO, what makes CommonLit's mission of spreading literacy so vital today?
There's a funding crisis going on in schools. So the fact that we offer either free or very economically priced solutions for schools is a big deal. So not all schools that choose CommonLit are choosing us because we're one of the most affordable options, but that is a driver for some school districts. The other thing right now that I think makes this, I have 2 young kids who are sort of at the learning to read age. So when I joined CommonLit, they were not at this age, but they're now in this zone. We have seen math scores start to catch up from learning loss that was experienced during the pandemic. Kids are not exactly where they should be, but they appear to be sort of closing the gap with where they should have been. We are not seeing that with reading. It's actually very frightening to see. And sort of making it even worse is that in addition to this sort of gap opening up from learning loss that's not closing over time, where it is closing, it's disproportionately closing for people who are better off and sort of have access to, parents have higher incomes, that sort of thing. Those are the sorts of kids that we would expect to be okay anyway, because their parents have sort of the resources to be able to take care of them and help sort of plug the gap where the education system is not able to. If you think about it, making sure that we have a literate population that can read, that can parse things like bias out of an argument, or can sort of understand the evidence that an author is showing, is a critical part of having a productive society, right? It's like, we need this so that these people can have good jobs and good economic opportunity. We need this so that people can evaluate, things that they're being told. This goes from the world of business, the world of politics, we live in a world where you have to be able to read and to think critically. I came to CommonLit originally because I was excited about the technical challenges, but I've really come to identify with the mission of making sure that we improve access to literacy education and that we just improve the overall literacy landscape.
Now, you mentioned the education funding crisis. When you joined, CommonLit itself relied entirely on grants for funding, but now 65% of the revenue comes from self-sustaining resources or sources. So what drove this financial transformation, and how do sales to school districts strike a balance between affordability and sustainability?
Yeah, this is, I really credit our partnerships team at CommonLit for successfully pursuing this idea that we refer to as the double bottom line. So this is the idea that we evaluate the deals for our paid services that we forge with school districts, both on the basis of how much revenue they bring in, but also on the basis of how much impact they might have. And I think it would be very easy to stray from that path. And I'm actually I'm just very impressed at how well we've hewn to that. The decision to move to some model where hopefully someday most of our revenue comes from earned revenue that we make from school district sales as opposed to just grants, is that the philanthropic landscape is rocky and uncertain. From year to year, you don't know if funders' priorities may change over time. You don't know if the sort of winds of what people care about, like, for example, right now, I think there's a lot of emphasis on policy, which means that there's less focus on directly funding curriculum initiatives. It's safer for us, and it also links us up to more unrestricted dollars that we can do exactly what we need to do with them if we are funding ourselves through school district sales. Another advantage of school district sales is that it ties us to the value that school districts are seeing. So there's a little bit of motivation for us to make sure that we're pursuing strategies that are very much where the school districts see value. It's also, I think, important for us to make sure that we're also pricing ourselves in a way where the school districts see the value. And one of the things I've noticed is that we managed to make a sustainable margin while still charging an extremely affordable price for school districts, which makes me think that there's a lot of margin that we are trimming away from some of our for-profit competitors. If an end effect of CommonLit is that in addition to spreading our own curriculum, we enforce some price pressure on the industry, that's probably a good thing as well.
Yeah, that's great to hear. CommonLit, you're focusing on pursuing large donors rather than using tech to manage a broad donor base. How do you identify the right donors to engage with? And what strategies have proven most effective in maintaining those relationships?
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert in philanthropy, but I think for us, we have found that we do not want teachers or parents to be cutting us checks. Right. So we don't want, we do sometimes get, a $50 check or $100 check with a handwritten note from a teacher. And it's, often the letter gets shared on our company Slack, and people I think it's a morale booster. But, for us at the scale that we're at now, it's a much, much more efficient use of our time to focus our efforts on earned revenue and then to only pursue the philanthropic opportunities that represent big sort of grants that really move the needle for us, that allow us to do big things. That's not to say if someone wants to throw $100,000 our way that we won't take that check. But pursuing fewer philanthropic opportunities but pursuing bigger ones enables us to make sure that we're working with the most strategic donors possible. And I will say that another advantage that we get from working with, super savvy donors is that they often know the landscape really well. So they're able to provide some advice and guidance to us in addition to financial support.
That's great. Speaking of scaling, many organizations rely on different technologies to scale effectively. What kind of technology does CommonLit use to serve over 30 million users, and how has this approach helped drive efficiency and growth?
Yeah, so I've always been a fan of systems that horizontally scale because it's easy to add capacity when you need it, and then it's easy to roll down capacity when you don't need it. CommonLit has sort of the ultimate seasonal use pattern. And I mean seasonal in sort of the technical term. So, over the course of the year, summer usage is much, much lower than, say, the week after Labor Day, that sort of thing. But we also see that weekend usage is much lower than during the week. And while we are used internationally, the off hours in the middle of the night are much, much lower than what I'd sort of describe as extended East Coast business hours, right? So we see things start to heat up around 7:30 in the morning, and then they start to taper off around 8 or 9 p.m. at night, East Coast time, as the West Coast students sort of stop doing their homework and that sort of thing. As far as tech, I had a mentor at Thoughtbot who taught me a very important lesson about something he called innovation tokens. And this idea was that you only have 2 or 3 innovation tokens at a time, and you should only be spending those innovation tokens on technology that's a difference maker for whatever your competitive advantage is. And that for everything else, you should use the most boring, stable technology possible. So, at CommonLit, we use a platform as a service solution called Northflank, which is essentially like an orchestration layer on top of AWS. This sort of spares us some of the DevOps need that we would have to directly manage things, but it is our compute, which I something I really like. We use Postgres and Redshift, for our data layer. And then I am the world's most unabashed supporter of Ruby on Rails. So the application that manages the vast majority of what happens at CommonLit is a Rails monolith. This code base at this point has seen significant overhaul from when I arrived in 2018, but it is the same code base that we've been working in for a very long time. So we've overhauled it, we've upgraded it, we've evolved it, we've carried it along, and then we're again avoiding using any exotic technology on this front. We're using React in the front end and Tailwind for managing our styles.
You talked a little bit about those peak hours that you've noticed. Obviously, reliability is critical for CommonLit's success, especially when your program is being used live in classrooms. So what steps or strategies do you take to ensure that the platform is running consistently and smoothly for teachers and students?
Yeah, this is super important. My prior experience working in various eyeball-based consumer solutions or, business products, if you were down for 5 minutes, your users were angry, but they'd get over it. If you are down for 5 minutes during a teacher's 40-minute class period, you have completely hosed their class. Just imagine 25, 30 students in a class and suddenly everything stops working. The student's attention starts drifting. You have a plan that you've worked on and now that plan's out the window. So I would say that we have emphasized reliability as a slightly stronger concern than a typical SaaS product might, for the sorts of situations that we're in. We've evolved, I think, a really nice set of solutions. So the first thing is we have an excellent test suite. So our CI system runs, tens of thousands of tests. We run it in a parallelized fashion. We get lots of feedback there. I think I'm, probably like a 1% expert on writing good automated tests in Ruby. It's something we emphasize on our engineering team. It's something we teach to junior engineers. It's something that we hire for senior engineers. But then we've evolved some other stuff over time that I think has been really effective. One thing that we do is a series of smoke tests or canary tests that we run. So whenever we merge to our main branch, we deploy that to a canary server, and we actually run a series of tests in production. So we create a teacher, we create a student, the teacher invites that student to their class, the teacher assigns the student a lesson, the student takes the lesson, the teacher grades the lesson. So at that point, we've sort of made sure that all of the critical functionality that if it did break, we would want to drop everything and fix it immediately is working. And that runs, 30 times a day because we're merging small things pretty frequently. And then we deploy very frequently as well. So, a typical day at CommonLit could see anywhere from 2 to 8 deploys. And, by getting things out quickly and then having the ability to roll back if we have any issues, I think we've improved reliability. When I got here, we had an offshore engineering team that worked with our in-house engineering team, and they would bundle up all of the work that people had finished, merge it in the middle of the night, deploy it, and then roll it back if there was a problem. But because CommonLit had such low usage at 2 or 3 in the morning, you might not see that anything was broken until you arrive at 8 in the morning. So some of the things that we've done for the purposes of improving reliability, like implementing an on-call setup with a pager and things like that, it's not really that we want to be doing a lot of work late at night. It's more that arriving at work or, arriving at your desk if you're working from home at 8 in the morning and discovering that there's a system meltdown going on, to me, is actually like the most stressful thing that could possibly happen. So we've done a bunch of things to try to avoid that kind of outcome. And I think in general, we have very, very few notable production incidents. So, and I think that's a testament to the approach that our engineering team takes, We have an excellent user support team, which I think does a really, really savvy job of giving us a heads up if something doesn't smell quite right. And all of this working together, I think, has been pretty successful.
As CommonLit continues to grow, how do you tap into your specialized expertise or introduce new initiatives to improve operations, measure success, or even refine offerings for students and teachers?
Wow, that's a great question. On the operational side, I think we have, in the past couple of years, we started to get more and more savvy about metrics. And I think, you mentioned, what are the benefits of moving away from a purely philanthropy-led model? I think the revenue pressure actually pushes us to act a little bit more like a SaaS product, like a commercial SaaS product. And so we have gotten much more sophisticated at looking at acquisition funnels, usage patterns. We use a Posthog, which is an analytics product to watch what our users are doing and where they seem to be flocking. And I think those sorts of things helping us get a little bit more savvy about running the product in a sophisticated manner have been really effective.
Like, how do you decide what your offerings are going to be for students and or teachers?
That's a great question. We have limited resources, right? And I think one of the things that we have to realize is that we can't do everything. So we have spent a bunch of time in the past year, our design team and our product team and our user research group, looking at what our ideal customer profile looks like. And, there are different kinds of schools that are looking for different kinds of curriculum fixes. And, at this point, we have narrowed in on what we call foundation schools, which they need a very particular kind of curriculum. They represent a large slice of the ELA curriculum market. And I think by getting those sort of different kinds of customer profiles and knowing what kinds of schools are going to be the best fit for CommonLit, we've been able to trim features away that got very little usage, or trim features away that are, maybe pushing teachers away from what we think is the ideal teaching pattern.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense to streamline in that way. Obviously, though, technology has transformed how CommonLit is delivering instruction materials and data-driven insights to educators. What's an example of a technological innovation that's made a big difference in how you support teachers and students?
Yeah, one of the things that we evolved over time is that we realized that schools have really, really spotty Wi-Fi connections. Or I should actually say some schools have very spotty Wi-Fi connections. So we have invested a lot of effort in allowing our exam and quiz answer capture system to sort of function in what I call a network hostile environment. So we've done a good job at retaining the data that students are filling out as they're working, and also telling students that we have not successfully uploaded their answers yet. So, the thing that I think would make the engineering team the saddest is a report that we somehow lost user data. So we want to avoid that at all costs. And, investing this effort in using local storage and web workers and other technologies to make sure that we are capturing students' answers and then successfully getting them into our system has made a big difference. We've also streamlined the way that we handle sort of in progress and submitted responses to enable us to process the data that students are passing us as they answer each question very quickly in a way that ensures that we don't lose data when they end up submitting their final results.
Excellent. Growing from 1 million users to over 30 million is no small feat. So what have been the biggest challenges and rewards, I guess, of scaling your platform so significantly?
Yeah, I think the hardest part about scaling is that you don't really know what's going to break until you hit the breaking point, right? So, I think we've done a good job at planning ahead. Every so often I go to our VP of finance and I say, I need to purchase a bigger database, that kind of thing. But to me, what's really challenging is that until something is really under load, I think it's hard to see exactly where things can break. And I think you could waste a lot of time sort of tying yourself in knots, running around trying to like pre-scale for all the things that like might break. And then you discover that those things are actually not there. We do look at all kinds of metrics on our infrastructure to see sort of like what might be approaching the breaking point. But a lot of it is, I have someone on our team who helps me with infrastructure, and we talk every so often about what is going to be what if thing X failed. If we hit the red line on our databases, what would be the thing that we would do? You can't, as I said, you can't anticipate every single challenge that you're going to have, but I think just remaining flexible enough that you're ready to go. I also think, sometimes performance hotspots become bottlenecks, become choke points really, really quickly, right? So we do spend time looking at our application performance management, looking for places where we could maybe do a little bit better. And that sort of like constant trimming of things, I think, can save you a lot of sadness later on.
Now, obviously, while you're not working with traditional volunteers per se, CommonLit's relationships are key, especially with schools and teachers. I mean, it's critical. So how do you engage with that audience to ensure that they've got tools and resources they need to succeed?
Yeah, this is. I am not a curriculum expert, so I'll do my best to explain things here. But we used to have a coaching team pre-pandemic that would actually go into schools in Washington D.C. and New York and really get to see CommonLit used on the ground. We still do try to set up opportunities to go into schools to see how the product gets used. I think having a user research team and a design team that are doing real user interviews has been really valuable for us. I think in CommonLit's early days, when the product team was even ex-teachers, we were able to sort of leverage the like memory of the people who had just been 2 years out of the classroom to sort of like build the thing that they would have wanted to see. And I think as the high quality instructional materials market has evolved, both because of regulations, but also because of the things that users are demanding, we have been pushed, I think, in a mostly positive manner to evolve what we're doing to meet teachers where they are. And that can be everything from there's a ecosystem of state standards that need to be met. So teachers in various states want to know that the curriculum is aligned to the standards of what they have to teach. There's different kinds of requirements about certain kinds of instruction that need to be taught. We want to meet teachers where they are there. I'd say one more thing is sort of interesting is that teachers are using CommonLit online all the time, but there's actually a mix of students using CommonLit on paper and using it online. We would actually prefer that they use it online because it makes it much easier for us to like track their progress and show how much they've improved. But I do think that after the pandemic, there's been a lot of screen fatigue, and some teachers don't want their students to be on the laptop all the time. So they're using CommonLit to pick their curriculum, and then they're delivering paperwork to their students so that they can do it in class, and then that gets entered back in later.
As somebody who has successfully scaled a nonprofit's tech and operations, what advice would you give to other nonprofit leaders looking to adopt technology and innovation to achieve their missions?
I think the most important thing that nonprofit tech leaders can do is to look at where their tech spend is going and make sure that it's really being channeled in a productive direction. One of the things at CommonLit that was like a shocker to me because I hadn't worked in education before is like engineering represents a very significant share of our outlay every year, both the stuff that we spend on infrastructure, but also the salary to hire experienced software engineers to run a product. And we have a small team. We've got 10 engineers running something that's powering something for hundreds of thousands of students every day, right? So it's to make that go the furthest, we have to be really, really aggressive about making sure that we're spending money on the right things. I'm a pretty I'm a pretty aggressive hunter for discounts. So whenever I can find vendors that have nonprofit discounts, I always like to go find those. And I think also picking technology that you can scale up and down as your needs evolve is really good. So, one of the reasons we like AWS is that it's very easy for us to add and remove capacity as we need it. It's very easy for us to add, services that we can easily access in a secure manner. One of the challenges for us is that a lot of SaaS services that we might do an annual contract with or something like that, we don't have even usage of things. Our September usage for many services will be 8-9x of what our July usage might be. So, sometimes we have to get a little bit creative with how we negotiate agreements and things like that. I also think that finding engineers who think about business problems and think about product issues is one of the most efficient things you can do. So I had a board member recently ask me, what is the thing that we do differently than everyone else? And I think we aggressively over-index on writing skill. And one of the reasons that I believe in writing skill is that I think the biggest source of waste in a software enterprise is often engineers building the wrong thing. And engineers build the wrong thing because they don't understand the requirements. And they don't understand the requirements because they're not communicating. They're either not communicating back to stakeholders what they think the requirements are, or they're not ingesting the requirements correctly from stakeholders. So, there's all these side advantages from working with good communicators and working with product and business focused engineers too, right? They can function with slightly less PM support. They can self-investigate certain kinds of problems on their own. So I also just, one of the things about Thoughtbot is that we didn't have PMs. So engineers and designers sort of self-led projects. And that was mind-blowing to me that you could really have these hyper efficient teams that were, if you had people who were versatile enough that they could do this kind of work. And so we do have product managers at CommonLit, and I am extremely, extremely grateful for them because they do an awesome job and they have really, really valuable experience. But I think the fact that we have engineers who think about product issues has really been a superpower of ours.
Looking ahead, what's on the horizon for CommonLit? Are there any upcoming innovations, goals, projects, anything you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, we just launched a redesign. So that's been really exciting to see the reception that we've gotten from users. And, we were a little bit long in the tooth on the way that we looked and felt before. So it's nice to have sort of a fresher feel. Going forward, we have not delved very deeply into AI yet. Sort of been waiting for the dust to settle so that we can make appropriate solutions. But that's definitely a direction that we're looking at. We've also reorganized our engineering and product and design teams into product domain pods recently. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it'll look like having, a team that's really focused on the day-to-day teacher experience and thinking about that for weeks on end, as opposed to maybe doing a project and then rotating off and doing something else again. I'm also really excited about putting more data in the hands of teachers. So I think in the past, we've shown lots of performance metrics on how your students are doing, but I don't always think that those metrics have been actionable by teachers, in the sense that they might see, okay, well, my students are struggling on this skill, but what do I do about it? And so I think the improvements that we're making in CommonLit are going to make it much easier for a teacher to take an interim result and then to match that to an action that they want to take to end up with the outcome that they want to see.
Well, Geoff, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Future Formed. Thank you for sharing your expertise and giving us an inside look at the impactful work that you and CommonLit are doing to improve literacy and empower teachers and students around the world. Where can we find out more, or listeners can find out more about CommonLit and the work that you're doing?
Well, if you go to commonlit.org, you can see our lovely website and get more information about all the work that we're doing. It's probably the best place to find us. We have a very active blog that our team works on all the time, talking about new developments. Yeah, and if you find us there and you see anything interesting, you can feel free to look us up on X.
Great. Thank you. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we've got a special offer for nonprofits. You can apply to receive 30% off as a discount with Jotform Enterprise. Visit jotform.com/enterprise/nonprofit to get started and see how Jotform can support your mission. Thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and stay connected for more stories of innovation and impact in the nonprofit world. Until next time, I'm Erik Fisher, and this has been Future Formed.